Well, hello everybody here again today. So I'm hoping that it's not too badly. But welcome back to Wednesday, and as I said, that with Jessie, two great lined up today. Part of the Cabbage Patch, where the Cabbage Patch dolls are kind of bored. I'm back, and we'll just hear from Jessie what she has to say about that. And then, of course, we've got the second show coming up 2 hours from now. So I hope you guys are going to catch us for that as well. I'm actually not going to go into too many announcements and things because I think it's just frustrating because my internet's cutting. Yeah, I know it's cutting, guys. So I'm going to bring Jessie on without any further to stage.
Let me quick, since we're doing the explorations here, we're doing
We're on the
today
stage.
just a
You
little
take over from
different.
here. Take over,
So
Jess.
I shall. Let's start since Shanti can't do the announcements. Let's do a few here. Um, I want to start. I encourage you visit the Aquarius Rising Africa and Solutions Twitter page. On there, you're going to find a lot of posts that are going to share with you what Shanti has going on for the week. She recently posted the weekly schedule, and it looks like, after today, it looks like she has Dr. Dennis Carroll on Thursday, December 11th. December 12th, she's going to have a drop in with Shanti. And then Saturday, she's going to have Raham on, as well as Jerry Mizinski and Jamie J. So it looks like Saturday is going to be packed with a lot of good content. And then Sunday, she has the Sunday Loop. And then for myself, I encourage you all, if you haven't got a chance to sign up yet, this Friday from 7 to 9, I have the next Land Assignment 1. Many of you have been able to come to those coaching sessions, but in those sessions, I begin to break down the regional rule of the system and how they identify all their areas with sigils regionally. And you'll see those in the city's signs as well as um, in the city logos, and you can know how to read those and understand what brotherhood groups are operating in your area. And once you can identify them, you can pretty much look for their layouts and begin to map out their underground. So in Land 2, we really get into the mapping out, and we've done some examples of that in our shows on the Karoo area. We've done Karoo, I think so far 1, 2, and 3, where we really are working through those coaching sessions, breaking down that area and how the Brotherhood and Sovereign Military are operating through that. So if you're able to come, I encourage you to join that. I also have one that will be available Tuesday morning from 10 a.m. to noon, and that's going to be an international coaching where I get into the coat of arms and break down, the different meanings based on the symbols that you find in those coat of arms. So I encourage you to catch up with those and then stay tuned because January 8th and 15th, I'm going to do a workshop on the Queen of Heaven. I'm going to really get into the different symbols that they use for Mary. Have you ever been curious as to why, if you may be seeing advertisements, maybe you've been in the Catholic Church. Some churches, all they use is the term Ave Maria. Others get into the Blessed Mother. Others may even, call her the Queen of Heaven. What are all of the different terms or names that they use for Mary? Is there a reason why they use different names? And, what is that reason? Does that tell us about their worship, their altars, and, their nefarious things behind the scenes? So I encourage you can register for the Queen of Heaven workshop on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. I also encourage you to follow some of my series on Kingdom Living TV. On there, you'll also find in the show notes links to my YouTube channel for Jessie Cebotar. And I always get it messed up because they like to add things, but it's Jessie Cebotar 4619. That was their random thing for my channel. And you can find my new series on there, Gather Your Word Daily, Your Manna Daily. Sorry about that. Gather Your Manna Daily. And that's going to be a new short series that's meant to really stir up your faith, build you up, build your confidence, strengthen you by encouraging you to be in the Word of God, thinking, on one or two verses at a time and just really enjoying the Word of the Lord. So I encourage you to check that out. All right. So today we're going to get into the BabyLand Hospital. We had last week we got into that a little bit in the Cabbage Patch show. If you haven't got to watch that show yet, I encourage you to go back and view that. We really got into a really dynamic conversation in that show that leads to the movement of children through the system. What are the nefarious things that they do? They're always going to show us in their signs and their symbols. Nothing is just random, it's not by accident. You get higher elite members that are really, structuring things in a way where they can, operate in their Kabbalah magic. They can operate in their Solomonic Enochian magic. They set things up so that they can do their rituals and their nefarious deeds. Now, as we get started, I will give a little disclaimer today. If you've got young kids listening, we may get into some things that are just a little bit more graphic. So you may want to kind of monitor that, or if you're sensitive to hearing about ritual things, you may just want to take note of that and listen lightly. So go ahead if you want to put up the first pictures there, Shanti. So this is BabyLand, and last week we got into the Cabbage Patch Kids and how you had a woman that initially created, then you had Xavier who kind of took over all of the Cabbage Patch concept and began to mass market it. And this is his property that is located in Cleveland, Georgia. And it's interesting, when we look at the structure of housing, not everything, you can tell by the churches, the older buildings that are built, the 1800s, early 1900s. Those ones for sure, the majority of them were created to communicate to the brotherhood about spiritual gates and places that they were identifying as temples or places of worship. So you can't always apply across the board when you see certain structures, if it's, communicating something or not, with residential places or mansions, it gets a little more difficult because those people may be in the system, they may not. It may be a home that they inherited. So they may not be in the system themselves. They could have bought it, you know, just thinking it's a beautiful home. So it's a little harder to detect. But as we look at this place overall and we begin to look at Xavier Roberts and his background, there are definite things that, you know, really tell us that he was involved in the system and that he has, laid out the Cabbage Patch Babyland in such a way that, it's meant to draw families in. It's meant to purposely target young girls and to begin to get a, we'll say natural, you know, extra natural relationship, which I believe deals with spiritual attachments with these dolls. Um, he's kind of created this whole framework that as we begin to look at it further, we're going to really see, how it's drawing girls in a certain way and y- that it's made to make light of things that these girls may be experiencing. Um, so, at first look, we do see, the structure of the house. We see, the pillars, which can be common in your different architecture types. In my series, Architecture and Altars, I begin to break down, how the architecture style tells you about the altars and what type of altars are in the place and where you can find them. This basic structure, we see the triangle topper there, which tells us that, if there's a system connection, then this house or building hospital is seen as a temple. And that means that there's going to be an altar or multiple altars. And they're going to tell you where the sacrifices are taking place. You do have a high connection to different forms of um, nature around the facility. I would propose that there's going to be multiple altars. One of those altars being underground under this facility, and then some being up in the high places or in the wooded areas. Um, so let's go ahead to the next one. So as we get further into this, um, they have different rooms in this hospital, and um, this is the nursery, and the first thing that we notice is the checkered floors. We see the cloud imagery in the room, and then it breaks forth into a pink room where you see images of horses, little rocking horses. And what's interesting about this is, you know, it in some ways it does represent the layout of some of the underground breeder programs, particularly the Chicago breeder program. The only difference really is the flooring there. But in the underground Chicago breeder program, the way it's set up, they have a room that they're going to call the nursery. That room has it looks like when you walk in, it kind of is structured um, like a auditorium where it just has these rows of wooden steps that funnel down into the middle into a hole. But as you go up the steps towards the top, you've got the walls of the room, and along those walls is where they have all of these old nursery cribs. There's about two or three in each area stacked up on top of each other. They're literally built right into the wall. And if you've ever been to some of the old churches, they have them where, the the side of the crib it goes up, and then like where it would be under the other crib, and then you just pull it down, and that's the crib that they have. And then as you'd go into the next room, um, which would sometimes be called the pink room, it would be massive, and they would have actual beds in there, um, like your old orphanages where you have just rows and rows of beds that um, aren't separated by anything. Some do have curtains separating from one bed to another, but most they're just open. And as they ritually impregnate these girls, they, the doctor would go from one to the other, prematurely delivering them, for their ritual times and for different rituals that they would perform, be doing within the breeder programs. Um, Here we see the checkered floor, which when you see the black and white checkers where it's equal like this, that's the Masonic symbol for, that there's a reflection room. There's something underneath there. When you see it in any, like the Capitol buildings or um, Masonic buildings, it's representing that there's a special room that they have to figure out how to astral project into that room. And they'll be required to do that before they take their initiation oath. So it's interesting that, in this room where they have the cribs, they also have that flooring representing initiation and oaths and, reflection. When you go down into the reflection room, there's a table that will be set up there. It will have items like a skull with an arrow through the eye. Um, Sometimes the arrow will be through the head. It will have a book. That book is going to be connected to their three great lights. So that it'll have a book. It will have candles. It will have a Masonic compass and a little easel, and they're going to reflect on, you know, what's down there. And it also usually will have gold of some sort. Um, and that's meant to make people think about the philosopher's stone. How do they create gold, white gold in particular? And so it's interesting that you've got a concept of all of these infants that are waiting to be chosen. Um, Even the structure of the layout when they're doing these initiations, that floor space will be kept open, and they will put things around the outer edges. So at first glance, we would think, oh, it's just for their viewing. They want, people to be able to easily come, walk through, the flow and go from one side of around the edges of the room to the other as they're viewing things. But I think there's much, much more to that. The other interesting thing about that is that, when you think about the astral projection and them having to reflect on things, um, the checkered floor represents the going down into a room. At the same time, they also have sky-like look in there, and that's not by accident either. Um, in the 80s, is when they really, probably even before that, your 60s to your 80s, is when the programmers in the system were using the over the rainbow programming. Um, and that sky is part of the first, phrases of that program. So that connects with very specific words, images that they're going to use in their hypnosis of kids as they're beginning to program their minds. So it would make sense that, with the girls that they had in the breeder programs from the 60s to the 80s, many of them went through those specific programs. So all of these things would be things that would trigger them. In fact, it triggers alters too, because that program is specific to, speaking to their alters, making them feel safe. The cloud image was supposed to be something that they relax, they, imagine themselves ascending, and everything is okay, and they can talk about, it's like gather around children and, you know, and talk to me. So it was meant to draw the kids to their handler, whoever's doing their programming. So that in itself is fascinating as well when we begin to look further into this place. Um, the rocking horses, it's interesting because even the layout of this, when we get into the programming, um, you've got the kids kind of rising up, they're gathering into a place where, it's like we can talk here, we can, relax, we're safe here. And then you see a room off to the side, and they would see that rocking horse. And all the kids in the system know that you can't ride the rocking horse. That's partly why it's on the wall in this imagery. But you would always be told you can't ride the rocking horses because they're broken. Um, you know, it was part of the programming. The imagery was something that was meant to, um, take you to different places in your mind to bring up different altars, those altars being connected to the carousel programming. So go ahead to the next one. Unless, Shanti, if you had questions, feel free to try to chime in and ask there before we go on here.
I'm actually good, and I hope it's the internet sounds a bit better, but I'm listening quite intently. So carry on. Well, I think we'll. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, and for me, what's really so fascinating is how you're connecting it to the programming as well. I didn't see that before. I didn't see how this is actually connected to the various whatever programs they have, Monarch or wow, it's just insane, actually.
And it gets further, as we look at this next area. At first, it's like you get this image. I mean, this literally is what it would look like, not with the flooring, but I talked about all the kids in the cribs around the walls, and this is what you would see with these infants, and they would have these Nazi nurses. They were Nazis, and they would, you know, um, they would be in charge of caring for those that they were going to be keeping for a while. Um, they also were in charge of disposing some of the babies as well, those that they deemed were not worthy of living. Um, with this room, there's more though, because, as we begin to look in it, I've talked about the checkered floors, that when you see the equal white and black, like we saw in the last room, that represents that there's, a gate that has access to below. When you see the checkered floors where it's more white like this with little bits of black, that represents that the spiritual gate is above. All right. So, it's interesting that all of a sudden you walk out and you've got this room that is much more lighter, with that, representation of accessing a place or something up above. Um, yet there's another thing that beyond the cages that this could, really be implying, and it gets into their magic. I've shown things about Biltmore and about Gloria Vanderbilt, and when we're thinking, I mean, think time frames. Think of the years, who were the grand high priestesses in the 80s? Who would this Xavier Roberts be connected to or under? Who would be overseeing him? You would have the grand high priestesses for the East and the South over Georgia. So, in that, I'm curious because all of a sudden you've got what looks like these glass boxes, and who is notorious for the glass boxes and putting images with dolls in the glass boxes? It was Gloria Vanderbilt, and she used those for necromancy. Um, where she would create images, dollhouse rooms. Um, she would take and here, if you're sensitive, just, you may not want to listen to this part, but um, she would connect the hierarchy kids with the first infant killings as they began their ritual training. It usually would start with, this extravagant greeting at one of her places. And, of course, she would always demand a little hug. As you went to hug her, next thing you know, she's got these scissors that, hold on one second. She's got these scissors that she's pulling out of her dress from somewhere or her outfit, and she's taken, a big chunk of your hair out of the back. And, what does she do with that later? She connects it with, the infant's DNA that was killed, and she creates these little like voodoo dolls with your DNA and that child that was murdered DNA. But the dolls are meant to represent you. She would make one for every individual that trained under her. And then she would use those in forms of divination to control people. And if you got on her bad side, she would use your doll, create this horrific death scene, and people, they would receive those death scenes, and shortly after that, they would be found dead. So this is what this reminds me of is Gloria's um, you know, dollhouse boxes that she would create. And so, in that, then, we talked about and proposed last week, is there a possibility that these are not just dolls? Um, what kind of magic was Xavier Roberts involved in? Did he get into necromancy? In that, did he get into necromancy where they're attaching spirits to dolls? Those spirits may be pretending to be the dead. Um, that was a way that they would help some of the girls who went through these horrific rituals process. Some of them could not mentally accept or receive that their infants had died in ritual. And so for those girls, they would, basically encapture the soul, or so that's what they would claim. And, the girls would continue to live having a relationship with the spirit that was in these dolls. And, many of them would think that these dolls really were living. They would hear them talking. All sorts of forms of divination with this. So, we talked about too how it could represent, children that they've actually, bred and adopted out. Is it a form of soul ties, soul capture? I
Yeah,
really feel it is. And I think that
absolutely.
many of the older generation of survivors from your 50s to your 70s, this was part of the monarch programs that they went through. Um, Go ahead with what you wanted to say
That
there.
that has to be the cruelest thing ever, to do that to a young mother who's had her child sacrificed. I mean, I cannot, I mean, and as you say, it's almost like the mental breakdown in these young girls is so huge that, again, they just start serving, from the way I see it, they just serve as a battery then for these evil monsters. Because, as you say, the soul tie, where they now have this necromancy tie, and this poor girl is completely deluded into thinking that this is her child. Wow.
And there's always that um, drive to save. You get with many of that generation, that drive that they have to save the babies. And this became a way that they could kind of appease that drive, and not have those women going out, kidnapping real children. Um, they, give enough of the imagery that, you know, that draws the altars, um, and keeps them busy, by they gotta collect them all, they gotta save them all, they gotta help them all, and, without them actually, you know, d going after the real kids or displaying where these real, environments are within the system. So, it kinda became a cover, a transition, um, that they would use, and also, a huge cover, because if any of them began to speak about these things, people would associate it with, oh, that's Babyland, that's dolls, that's not real. That's just something that is part of, the Cabbage Patch Babyland. So it would get those who weren't aware or didn't know, um, to question, to doubt, to not see the validity of what these girls or women were talking about. Um, so it really serves a lot of purposes for the system. Go ahead to the next picture.
Ex- exactly. It's completely like, well, she's lost her marbles, what's she talking about, Babyland? She's kind of she's delusional. She needs to be locked up.
Yep,
Wow.
yep.
So
So then
cool.
you get into, the magic crystal tree. And this is one of the centerpieces. We've talked about, we've done a show on the um, moonlight tree rituals that occur. And within this system, they're going to have several things that revolve around the trees. And this gets into their worship of, tree spirits and elementals. Can that include fairies? Yes. Wherever you have tree spirits, you're going to usually have fairies that are around that area too. Um, but they'd have these massive, grandfather trees. These are trees that they designate, to, perform rituals at, um, you know, at the place where the roots are, and they will pour out the blood on the roots. But worse than that, like we talked about in, the one ritual that they do, how they will kill all the male infants, and they literally will bash and dash them, against the ground, the tree, the rocks, um, and spill their blood on that land. And in that, then, you've got that imagery here. You've got the rocks raised up, you've got the tree, and then you've got all these little cabbage patches coming out of, cabbage leaves. And, that going back to different images of, feasts that they're going to have where you've got several images with that. Um, we've talked about, how some of that has been furthered, that imagery with Marina Abramovich for the spirit cooking, where they, will show people with their heads through the table. Um, and the truth is that these individuals consume people. Um, this gets into their cannibalism. But going back to Gloria Vanderbilt, um, she, like, when the priestesses go through training, they train them you know, how to prepare children for consumption. And, they would put them in roasting pots with all sorts of vegetables. They would, make it look like it was something fun. They literally will play games with the young children that they're going to consume because they don't want them crying or fighting or trying to get out of the, pot. But really, it's a horrific, like, sometimes they'll paralyze them so that they can't move. But, they want these children to be absolutely terrified. And, at the same time, it's going to be like a controlled experiment. Um, so it's horrific, the things that the hierarchy children see them do to children. But that's part of their worship of these entities that demand blood. And, that's what it goes back to. It goes back to their contracts that they've made with these demonic entities. And those contracts impact the land and the harvests. That's why they make the contracts, because they believe that it will then give them good crops and their fields will be blessed and their produce will be blessed. So even in this, there's a profit that Xavier was making in all that he displayed. He's making a profit even off of the images of death in the system.
It's serious. It seriously takes a special kind of stupid to think that by cooking small children in a pot full of vegetables and traumatizing and terrorizing the living whatever out of them, and think that that is going to bring you profit and good crops. I mean, maybe for 1 or 2 seasons, and then, of course, by natural law, that stuff comes crumbling down, right? And then the
Yep.
more their own evil catches up with them, the more kids and animals they have to sacrifice to these evil monsters. So then their fear just intensifies, because now they think that they're not sacrificing enough. But they can't for 1 second realize that what they are doing is so evil in the eyes of God that it just cannot even carry on anymore. I mean, it's like, how does anyone think that by boiling a child alive, they are going to get good crops? That's the long and short of
Right.
it, right?
Right.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
really the mentality we're working with. That takes a special kind of stupid. There's no other word.
I agree with you. Yeah. So I mean, you get a lot of ritualistic concepts in this, even in the tree. you get the concept of the 1,000 points of light. That ritual is going to be connected to a certain place that is connected to the carousel programming. You have in the background there, to the right side, you see what looks like a wishing well. Wells were something that they would use it several different ways. Um, one, it would represent the desecration of the water and the waterways. So it was common for them, to um, use wells as a form of desecrating that water with the dead, and then um, they could also use the wishing wells as willing consent or contracts. People, what did they do? They touch money, they throw the money in there to make a wish, and that's your willing consent now with these spirits and the spiritual attachments. You've invested, you've paid for it, and they're going to be more than happy to show up because you know you've you've made a contract with them now, with your quantum currency, your fingerprint on that coin. So it's a way for them to get access into the lives of hundreds of thousands of little girls, without them even knowing. Go ahead to the next one. So we see more too. Again, we see the dollhouse theme. Um, I really think that a lot of that is going to be connected to Gloria. Um, you know, but some of the other concepts, they've that imagery of the tree with the baby in it. Um, you'd get um, things with the tree worship, where they're going to require certain things. The killing of the king ritual is seen in the Golden Bough, which is a book where it gets into the wood worship, and how, there's it really gets into very dark forms of magic. What's interesting with this is, like that image shows like a baby that was just born. When a baby's just born, there's still going to be an attachment with the umbilical cord. Now, here's where it connects to the killing of the king ritual. One of those rituals, and this, I mean, if you are sensitive, take a few minutes and don't listen. But the the one ritual, literally they open somebody's gut, and you know, they will walk around the tree, wrapping their intestine until they die. So it's interesting that, the umbilical cord is that imagery of an open intestine, right? And so I mean, there's nothing that they left out in this. It all goes to the worship of these tree gods. And, I would definitely say I see enough to believe that Xavier Roberts was part of the system. In fact, that he was a druid, and that he went through the Golden Bough rituals and books. And that's why he's embedded it all in the imagery here. Um, so, it's not by accident. And the interesting thing is that when people go, you know, there's always kind of this eerie feeling. Like you want to be excited, you want to be like, oh, yeah, this is really kind of a cool experience. But at the same time, it leaves you with that creepy, unsettled, because in your heart, that there's something much more to it. You just don't know enough to know what it is. And it's meant to stimulate those memories. It's meant to begin to stir up nightmares for, those who have been through those rituals and things, but not to give them enough where they can be like, wow, this was what I went through. But it's just going to torture people by stirring up the memories. Um, so, there just as we keep going, we're going to see, you know, more and more. With that ritual, why do they have the nurses wrapping in a blanket? Um, because you're going to have certain, as one person's life is given, another's going to be born. That wrapping of the blanket representing, those that are safe, those that survived, those that are now going to go out and live, because they're going to be the king. They're going to have a purpose and a hope. They're going to become gods. Well, one gave their life to be eternal, to be connected to the tree spirits. They look at that as an honor. The one that sacrificed, it's like, yeah, you're the one, you're chosen. I mean, they really celebrate, which is even sicker. And these people are so deluded that, believe that they're entering their ascension, that they endure such a death and literally give themselves as a sacrifice to these tree spirits, believing that they're getting, to enter into that place of eternal life. Um, so go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so just more images. Um, they're going to have actual people. And, um, I don't know if it's particular like to the place, but it is curious. You get the doctor in the white coat. Dr. Whites were heavily involved in the programming. Dr. Greens, Dr. Blacks, they all would have specific positions, things that they would do. Their coats would usually go with their name, and that was all part of the different monarch programming that they would do. And, I don't think any of it's by accident. I think, it's very purposeful in what they're displaying. Go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so this is back in that first room again, and again, just images that you're going to see. Um, a lot with the Christmas trees, Christmas being a high ritual time, and maybe this, is just taken during the actual Christmas season. Like, I don't know if they keep that decor up the entire time, but Christmas trees, Christmas wreaths, all communicate death, and mass ritual season. So, um, it's interesting that they've got all that imagery together with mass amounts of babies and infants, which is what they would be ritually sacrificing. Um, Go ahead to the next one. Yeah, and this was the incubator room. Um, Again, the picture in the background there, we see the single tree highlighted, but we also see the winding path, which that's a symbol for your golden dawn. That also represents the snake in the book Initiates of the Flame. One of the first pages, they have the snake coiling or winding up and around. That imagery represents the multiplicado spell that they're going to use in the Order of Melchizedek to increase themselves, to, increase the seed of Satan. Um, so I think all this imagery is very purposeful, again, meant to, remind girls who have gone through the breeder programs of specific things, but also to desensitize the next generation. Um, to make them more comfortable with these images that they may see, things that they may experience without them even knowing that that's what they're experiencing. So go ahead to the next one. Um, you get the sun back there. You get the stork that's seen as being part of, the pulling out of the incubators. Um, you know, this for me really reminds me of some of the connection with some of the breeder programs, like we talked about the Plum Island. That would be one of the facilities where they actually have, animal doctors. Animals are given human characteristics. You get into the grotesque experimentation of, the humans and blending humans and animals. Here, they've got the blending of the human and the plant, um, with an animal doctor kind of looking over. Um, that, birds with the large beak is going to remind survivors of, the some of the evil doctors that wear the dark mask with the long beak. That's a specific order that gets in. You get a lot of your morticians, those working with the dead, who are going to wear those masks and who will be involved in different forms of alchemy. So all of this, kind of beginning to desensitize. Uh, I'm curious. I believe they call this the sunshine room, but it just gets interesting. But go ahead to the next one. So here you had, America's favorite cartoon witch. I don't know what that's all about, but it looked like you had somebody, connected. It looks like Jen Ben Media, Atlas Obscura user, um, who's there, and witches, the promoting of the dark, infiltrating um, into that place. But I'm curious if they did a whole line of, little cabbage patches that were witches as well. So interesting. Go ahead to the next one. So one of the biggest things with this was the connection with the adoption papers, and we had talked about that in our Cabbage Patch episode a little bit, um, where they're the certificates are very specific. Um, they're going to require a signature, and signatures are something that the system uses in their Masonic annuals, where children are going to sign their name in the annual. That's going to be connected with their handprints on the walls, and that gives the system access to be able to pull money off of their name. Um, a signature is seen as something that's connected with your money, your trust, and so in this, they're getting a lot of little girl signatures, as well as, you're signing to connect yourself to be responsible for that doll or that baby, um, and whatever's within it. Um, it's part of your, again, a quantum signifier. Your breath sound is connected to your name, and you're literally making a contract. Notice the purple ribbons in this, purple being connected to your Order of Melchizedek, as well as Freemasonry, and the gold wheel seal. Seals are also something that's very important in magic, and so it's interesting that you're signing your signature with a seal, um, a sunshine seal, a gold seal, and now you're bound to that, and you don't even know what you're bound to. Go ahead to the next one. I'm not sure how many we have left here. This gets into, notice they're actually taking swearing oaths. In my Unveiling the System series on kingdomlivingwithjessie.com, I have an episode about the judges and the orders of the Red Banner, and I get into like the judges, the lawyers, and the hidden Nazi symbolism, how this um, oath taking is actually, it has a lot of hidden meaning. Each of your hands in the system represent one tablet of the Ten Commandments. So, if you have just one hand up, you are bound by the first five, and that is going to be connected to the first five Reichs of Nazism. Um, that deals with underground access as well. When you hold both hands up, that is going to be connected to the 10 Reichs. And when, they take their oaths, like, because your hands then are representing those tablets, it's representing the Noahide law, which is prior to Christ. That's what the Sanhedrin, who are at the top of the system, they don't receive Jesus as their Messiah. They are bound by the law, so that's what they know. But what they get us to do without even knowing it, all of our, offices in our government, you take oaths, right? And so this is how they do some of their hidden oaths without us knowing it. But you have to do your oath. You raise the one hand and you place the other hand on the word of God, right? And you swear, you know, on that oath. But what is it really representing? Is it representing that you are taking an oath before God? No. What it's representing is you literally are placing the law and the Nazi Reichs above the word of God. Now, this is why Trump did not take his oath with his hand on the Bible. Instead, you saw Melania standing there. What did she have on the word? She had a second Bible, putting that there's nothing above the word of God except the word of God. And they both were standing, in the word. So that was very purposeful in that. So they get these children to begin to take their rights and their oaths under the Noahide law without knowing it yet. But it's again desensitizing to the symbols, getting them to engage in the Nazism without even knowing it. So, um, you know, this is part of their oaths and vows. Go ahead to the next one. Here's another thing. You have, they're going to have a couple signatures on here, which is important, and the layout is important. Every legal document is going to be found in this form and structure. So it gets really interesting when I begin to describe this. Placement and names is important. So in this, if you like, they've got it where it's folded in three, but we know that in the system, in their imagery, there's three colonnades, three pillars. So think about this. They literally lay out the contract in the Solomonic magic form. All of your legal documents will be laid out this way. You will have certain things on the left, you will have certain things in the right, and you will have certain things specifically in the middle. Your courthouse will always be in the top, in the middle, representing that they have all the authority. Other things will have certain lines drawn underneath them or will be confined in boxes. Your plaintiffs, your defendants, their names will always be on the left column. What does the left column represent in the system? It represents the left-hand path, the evil. So think about this. In the court documents, the plaintiffs and the defendants are always seen as the evil ones. They're always put on the left. What's put on the right? Your case numbers, your docket numbers. Anything connected to that is always seen as being good. That's what that's saying. It's under the good part, right? It's not confined, and your judge is seen as the main authority, the main power. The courthouse is seen as the main authority, the main power. Your orders will always be in the middle, and you'll have certain paragraph forms with that. So it's very specific. And so in this, they're putting that oath. Notice the structure. The Cabbage Patch Kids logo representing the hospital is up at the very top, seen as the most important thing. Now, in this, the way the wording Cabbage Patch is laid out, that even goes to your base structure of a Ouija board, communication with the dead. One sec, as I'm going to explain that just a little bit more here. So you'll notice the curved letters, and what is always under those curved letters on a Ouija board, you'll have the numbers 1 through 0. Then you'll have, at the very bottom in the middle, you'll have the goodbye, and then you'll have at your top, you're going to have a sun and a moon. Now, even in this, notice how strategically in the very top corners, they have a boy with an 83, and usually your moon symbol represents the female magic, the night magic, but they're putting a boy in that symbology with a number. Then, usually your sun, the other side on the left, is seen as your masculine, but they put a girl in that imagery. You have the supports there, and you see what looks like twinning pairs. It's very specific that you've got the column supports, you've got the twinning pairs in that. Underneath that, where you have where the numbers would go under the Cabbage Patch Kids, you have the official adoption papers. And then the oath right underneath that. So there's some things with this that get kind of curious, but you'll see all your official paperwork in that form. When you have the signatures up top, that's representing who has the authority, who has the voice. And the voice is limited because they write the name on a line with a position underneath that is putting a control on that name, meaning that person can't speak for themselves. Who has to give them authority to speak? The lines will connect the voice to the authority, which those lines at the top there connect to the Cabbage Patch Kids, connecting that those individuals speak on behalf under that organization, that headship, including Xavier Roberts. He's bound under a headship. Whatever that organization, that business, that company, all of this in proper legal form, thus making these real documents that are binding. So, it's interesting how easily they can, create things like this without anybody even knowing. And both your adopting parent and the signature of the witness are going to make these legal documents representing something within the system, going in proper court form. Go ahead to the next one. And I think, how many more do we have?
I'm just going to check quickly.
Yeah, so while you're checking, this one again, again, when we think form, fashion, we see very similar forms.
Sorry, Jess, it's the last one. This is the last one.
Okay. So again, they're putting the form, all of that is going to go somewhere and be very specific. And, I think it is as well connecting to necromancy. And, they're going to have their different forms that they're going to fill out, binding, serving as a binding without these children really knowing what they're being bound to. Also being a major money funnel, beyond just making money on the dolls that they're selling, behind the scenes, how much profit was Xavier and other high priests and priestesses in that area able to pull off these signatures, to gain authority over every child that came through adopting. It'd be curious if there ever could be follow-up on every kid that adopted a Cabbage Patch to say what spiritually has happened in your life. Um, what has been your experiences? Have you had any paranormal activity, health issues? Have they ended up in the medical hospitals, with major health issues? How many of them are still living? How many of them are dead? That would be, a worthy study to figure out, to see the impact that this has had long term. Um, because I don't believe it's just a creative, marketing ploy to sell a product. I really think that we've shown that there's enough connected to different, brotherhood and sovereign military beliefs and their religious structure, to say that there's a satanic connection. There's a ritual connection with this hospital, and as well as a financial connection, both quantum finances, plus I believe that they were using that signature to, access money through the IRS off of these children, you know?
It just,
So
it, this rabbit hole, it just carries on, doesn't it?
it
Because
does.
it's so clear what you're saying, especially after following
Go
for the
back
last
go
few
back one
years.
more. I'll let you finish, but remind me, I wanna
Mm,
talk about the parent padre of the court. Go
No,
ahead.
carry on, carry on. No, carry on.
So, I forgot to mention that when they put the court, in that top spot, or whatever they're putting in that top spot, it's connected to what's called parent padre, and that was is legal terms that are connected to the court becoming the parent for orphans. All right, so it it connects then to, the concept that these are orphans, they need a parent. The overall parent is going to be the organization or the courthouse, right? And then they're going to dictate if they sublet the parenting out. So that's why you see the signature of the person who's being the adopting parent at the bottom and not highlighted in the middle, because they are subject under, every voice, every authority, every form that's above them, which is going to be your adoption officer, your Cabbage Patch Kids, and your chief of staff. This is the same in your legal court documents. If it were up to me to do my own documents, I would put my name at the very top in the largest form, and I would put the court in a box and everything underneath it in a box, letting them know that they're their own little entity confounded by their own courthouse boundaries, but I'm not bound in their courthouse boundaries. They have no control over my voice or my form. I'm in my own right standing. So it's interesting when you look at these documents, the authority and how it impacts our voice, our rights, our standing, and this is how they get away with controlling us.
Wow. Every angle, you know, I mean, if I just look at also the stuff we were speaking about in previous shows, the Wisconsin ones, I think we did recently. But
The
it kind of all
Minnesota,
ties in.
yeah,
Minnesota,
yeah,
sorry, Minnesota.
land grab, yeah.
Yeah, the land, yeah. It's crazy because now, I mean, this is complete soul / loose harvesting, for if that's the word, from kids. And also what we've heard, that there are underground mines there, and that under that particular, okay, here I am back. Let's hope my internet holds. Under that particular hospital, we were doing it. We were looking into it, and I think also in that series for that YouTube channel, The Mind Unveiled. Sorry, these guys have got a really good channel, and they've got a lot of information on this sort of stuff as well. So it's really worth checking it out, because they've clearly researched this a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when we look at that and seeing that underground, what they're saying is that, sorry, my earpod keeps falling out. What they're saying is that there's a whole lot of kids working. So they're taking, I mean, there's obviously a connection between the hospital and the little kids that are working underground as literal child labor, slave labor in the gold mines there. Now, I don't know, do you know anything about that? Can you talk to us on that at all? Is there anything like that
I mean, they
according
do
to what
things
you
like
know?
you can get out, and that's why, they, it symbolizes, the children being purchased. And that's their hope, is that they'll get purchased, they'll get adopted to get out of there. So it gets into,
Right.
their underground slavery for sure. But
Wow.
yeah, I think it'd be worth to look into, um, with that, by looking at the territory, the land, um, what do they have, the mine area, who's owning that property? Is there underground military connection to that? Um, you know, who is supplying the children for the labor in that? And my guess is that these are children that have never even been documented. That was one of
Yes.
the biggest things with the breeder programs, is that you had mass amounts of children being born that never received a birth certificate. They, never were acknowledged as living. So there isn't a way to account for them. They didn't have to, they're treated just like cattle. They can classify those kids as whatever they want to classify them as. And, therefore they could sell them into prostitution. They could keep them underground, for work labor. They could, put them through the human meat markets, whatever they decided they could do with these children. Um, it doesn't take away the fact that these are children. These are living beings
Exactly.
that have a soul. They have a purpose. They have a
Exactly.
reason to live. Um,
Exactly.
you know,
I'm just interested, Desmo, you've left a comment here, and I'm just going to end off on this here, Jess, because we've got another show coming up on our notes. You mentioned, yeah, I had a bald, hard-headed baby boy named Frederick Xavier. Now, I'm assuming that's not a human baby you're talking about.
I think she was saying her Cabbage Patch Kid was bald and was named Frederick Xavier.
So I want to just clarify on that before I go for the tangent. And it was, in fact, your human baby. But that's an interesting name, Jessie. What do you make of that? I mean, if she had adopted that, obviously, maybe the owner of the Cabbage Patch Kids, right? That one
attached his name to a lot of them. The Xavier was his name. You know, Friedrich too, like you can look into the background, you know, that's going to be more your German type name. In Georgia, you do get a Friedrichsburg. So it's curious, you know, with all of that, is he connecting to some of the areas around, you know, but I think they were going off of probably every name they could think of to, you know, make a variety to encourage kids to, you know, come up with names and yeah.
I find it interesting, if you don't mind answering this, that you said last week your sister was given 10 or something, or a whole lot. I don't know if you said 10, and you were given 1. So what do you think was the intention with that? I mean, especially if we're
it was very
looking at
specific. Yeah, it was very specific. One of the things is that within the system they like to create jealousy. You know, whatever the children that are chosen, so they claim, your life is not easy. You don't get pampered. You know, it's learning to lack, it's learning to not receive love. Everything is withheld from you. You know, even at Christmas time, everybody would get gifts. Me and my brother, the youngest brother, would always be left out. It was purposeful. You know, if we wanted something, people for the family, if you wanted something, you know, you'd all come, you'd tell what you wanted, you pick out your thing, and then next thing you know, everybody else is getting what you wanted. You don't get what you want. So that's one thing, you know, they want to create that desperation for love and connection, but the never being able to get it. They want you to feel unworthy, undeserving of it. The second part was very specific to my life and my training around prior to that, receiving you know, I watched as my sister receive so many. And then, you know, I went through the horrific death of my training partner. After that, they tried to connect me to another. They tried to get me to choose other training partners, one of them being very specific. So in that, then, you know, what do? They give me a Cabbage Patch doll with the little boy's name that I absolutely refuse to take as a training partner. So that's, you know, their sick way of torturing. You know, and it had nothing to do with him at all. It was all that, you know, I just refuse to do that again. You know, it's like, no, I'm not going to. And you know, at that point, just, you know, up until age 10, like I received that right before the Lord literally got me out and put that wedge between me and everybody in the system. But yeah. So it was purposeful. It was meant to remind me, you know.
Do you think that as giving her so many, that each one of them might have had an attachment to it as well, to
I
really
do.
just
Yeah, I do, and I think that
disturb
was
your
specific.
sister's peace?
Yeah, but it was more like there was things later, you know, I think that, you know, she was being brought up for certain things, and I think that was connected to, you know, the stuff that they were doing with her. And,
Right.
it doesn't
Right.
surprise me they were giving her lots of attachments and,
Mm.
connections.
Shame. I was thinking about that, and I remember so badly wanting a Cabbage Patch Kid. Well, I was a teenager already when they came out, but there was such a trend going on. And for some, my mother said, "You're not bringing that thing into the house." And I don't know why,
Good for your
but I
mom.
wasn't. Exactly. She
Yeah,
said, "There's no way you're bringing that thing into the house." She says, "It doesn't feel right." And I mean, we don't have religious upbringing, right? She just
mhm,
said those, or she said those things don't look right. And when she
mm,
said that, I believed her because she still has super good intuition,
yeah,
around stuff like that, which is amazing. But I'd actually like to just, before we close off, maybe invite the viewers who've had Cabbage Patch Kids dolls. Um, and I know Jessie, you mentioned earlier, if anything specific has perhaps gone down, with it.
yeah,
Has there been any paranormal activity? Since then, if you can, and it'd be a good, I think it'd be a good exercise, even if you're unaware, to kind of backtrack and just have a look and
yeah.
just think about that. Did anything happen
Or
in your
even if it was
family?
at your safe space, like if you had a lot of
Mm,
nightmares and you were good as long as you slept with that doll, that would be another curious way it could be that was your safe space, or you were always safe with the doll.
absolutely. So they also get you to have that connection. And you know what's interesting? You were
Good
talking
things.
about that.
Yeah.
I've been what on when you do scroll stuff and the adverts that come up. And now again, and it's always showing Asian people doing this, so it's clear that it's coming from Asia. You see a picture of the father lying there scrolling on his phone, and the baby lying next to him and being cuddled by obviously a remote controlled teddy bear of sorts. So this
Hmm.
thing is patting the baby's back like this, dum, dum,
Hmm.
cuddling the baby to sleep while the father is lying there scrolling on his phone. And this is supposed to be the latest trend. I
Well,
was mortified when I saw that because
yeah.
not only are they bringing out fake toys now, right? These remote control little puppies and kittens and things that can bark and meow, but now they're bringing out toys that actually put your child to sleep in a fake way, because any parent knows your baby loves to be close to your chest, feeling your heartbeat, smelling you,
Yeah.
being comforted by your sounds, and the fact that they feel wrapped up in your love.
Hmm.
Now, parents are too damn disconnected because they're too interested in what's happening on their phone that now they're even buying cuddle toys for their babies, remote controlled cuddle toys, cuddlers. And I don't even know, what do you call these things that sits there and pats your baby's back?
I have no
That is,
idea. Never seen or heard of that yet.
I just saw it the other day. I was mortified, and I've seen it twice come up
Wow.
now. So clearly I meant to see that. But anyway, oops,
Hmm.
here goes my camera. So yeah, I think let's call it a day for now, and then we will convene a little in about a half an hour from now. Yeah, Jess.
All right.
Thank you. Super
Sounds good.
interesting again. Hmm.
All right. We'll see you for the next one. We'll get into the Egyptian Museum. That's going to be a great
Right.
show.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely. Do you want to round off for us in prayer?
Yeah, let's do it. Heavenly Father, we thank you that although it's hard to talk about these things, we thank you for um, your grace that you encourage us, you draw us close, you bring us into that safe space where we can process, we can learn about these things, and yet we can be empowered to know how to strategically pray, to know how to be aware of certain areas and certain things that may impact our children, our homes, may even impact our healing. through childhood things that we've been through. So, Lord, we ask for all those who have been listening today, that any who may have been impacted by these things in their childhood, we ask that you would give that resolve, that you would bring them to that place of rest as they work through the things that they've been through. And we ask for your grace in that. We thank you that your mercies are new every morning and that your love abounds. And we ask that you would bless us, continue to bless our day, continue to bless our healing. And we ask again that you would be with us for this next show, and that you'd be with our internet, our airways, our technology, and our equipment, so that we can know and understand these things and be good stewards of them. We ask for this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Jessie.
Yep.
And thank you to all you beautiful people who joined us here today. And I'm happy my internet seems to have settled down a bit. Thanks to Mona in the background for popping the pictures up. And yeah, we'll see you later. And yeah, guys, if there's any of you that would maybe like to, as we were saying, share any information about if you've had a doll, if you've had any kind of weird experience with that, love to hear from that. So you either pop us an email, we can maybe chat about that in a show as well. It would be very interesting. So if you're willing to participate, please do. And yes, like, share, subscribe, keep our algorithms up. You all know we're pretty shadow banned, and but the sun never stops shining, even when we shadow banned. So take good care. We'll see you in about a half an hour with the Egyptian unveiling. Call it the unveiling. My weather is warming up, although the wind is blowing gale force today. But sure, yeah. And you see, I'm finally in summer clothes. I feel so happy. I'm sorry for all the things I said when it was winter, guys. Goodbye.